Okay, so where was I? Yes, Darth and Joe Vader were 6 years old and 4 years old when they were having this adventure, and they had just taken off and were trying to figure out where they wanted to go for this trip. And Luke Skywalker suggested, well, maybe we should go visit my friend Princess Leia. But Super Duperman said, nah, I don't feel like, that's Alderaan, right? Yeah. Well, I don't feel like going there. There must be some other interesting place to go. And so they thought, well, we could go to Cheese Planet. Nah, I don't want to go there, said Nostril Man, because I don't really like cheese that much. So they were flying around trying to figure out where to go. And then, of course, Darth and Joe made sure at the very start to tell Mayonnaise Man, don't touch the controls of this spaceship because, first of all, it doesn't belong to you. It belongs to Luke. And second of all, you'll get mayonnaise all over the controls. And then when we try to touch them, we'll just slip and hit the wrong controls, and we might even crash. So please stay off the controls. And they decided, well, okay, we could go visit the Tribbles on Tribble Planet, or we could go to Planet Vulcan, and that's where they decided to go. Planet Vulcan is where Mr. Spock lives. He's a Vulcan. He has pointy ears and pointy eyebrows, and he's very logical, and he's a very nice man, and they decided, well, let's go visit Mr. Spock on Planet Vulcan. And they started flying that way, and Darth Vader was driving the spaceship, and when Darth wasn't looking, Mayonnaise Man just couldn't help himself. He really wanted to help drive the spaceship, so he was curious, what does this button do? And he pressed the button, and guess what? He splattered mayonnaise all over the controls. And Darth said, you got mayonnaise on the controls. Didn't I tell you not to do that? And Nostril Man said, don't worry, I'll blow it off. And Darth said, no! But it was too late. Mayonnaise Man blew the mayonnaise off the controls, but when he did it, he blew a bunch of buttons and knobs and switches, and pretty soon the spaceship was spinning out of control, and it started getting close to something that was sucking them in, some sort of gravity field. They couldn't control the spaceship, and Super Duper Man looked at the control panel and said, what's this? And Joe Vader looked at it and said, it looks like a rainbow hole. We're getting sucked into a rainbow hole. And pretty soon they were sucked right into it. Sucked into the rainbow hole, and they landed, and a rainbow hole, of course, has doors to an unlimited number of universes. So, since they were down there, they decided to have an adventure in the rainbow hole. And they walked into the hallway, and, Mayonnaise Man was apologizing, but they said, well, don't worry about it. At least we ended up in the rainbow hole. Where do you want to go? And Joe and Darth Vader had been to the rainbow hole many times, so they knew that there were a lot of interesting rooms. There was the balloon world, there was the French fry world. Actually, they had never been in the French fry world because every time they walk into it, giant French fries fall on their heads, and that's kind of painful. So they decided not to go into the French fry world. But there was one small door that they hadn't been in. It was only about 4 feet tall, which since Joe and Darth were 6 and 4 years old, they could still squeeze through. Super Duper Man had a little problem getting through, but what Mayonnaise Man did was he put mayonnaise on the inside of the doorway so it'd be slippery, and Nostril Man blew behind Super Duper Man and pushed him right through the doorway with his breath because he slid right through. And then Nostril Man went in afterwards, and Luke started to go in, but they accidentally shut the door and he bumped his head on the door. Ow! And then he opened up the door and he walked through after them. And it was a very strange world. It was all green, first of all, but as soon as they walked a little bit away, it started turning other colors, and it was a rather pretty world. In fact, it was a rainbow universe. It had all the colors of the rainbow: red, red, orange, 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 yellow, 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 green, 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 blue, 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 violet, violet, red, violet. All the colors of the rainbow were right there, as well as colors that you couldn't even see with your own eyes, like ultraviolet and infrared. And so they were wandering around and seeing if anybody lived in this universe when they heard this sound. And they looked around to see where it was coming from, and they saw a brown paper bag. And Darth Vader lifted up the paper bag, and inside the paper bag was a radio, and it was playing a radio station, and that's where the sound was coming from. And so Joe Vader thought, well, maybe that's what music sounds like in this world, because we are in a different universe, and maybe the people of this universe listen to music like that. And so all of them started singing. Let's try singing that song. They all started going, and Nostril Man said, and Mayonnaise Man said, and pretty soon, and Luke said, and Darth said, and Joe said, and Super Duper Man, and they were all singing together. And it was a lot of fun, and pretty soon, they didn't notice at first because they were so involved in this singing, but there were little people popping up all over the place. These people had big round heads and 5 or 6 eyeballs on their heads, and arms with hundreds of fingers, and they started walking up, and Luke got very scared, and he ran and he took out his lightsaber. He was ready to fight these creatures, but then one of them came up, and he was different looking. He had 2 pointy ears, and he was very short and kind of crinkly and old looking, and he said, "You are afraid. Do not be afraid, Luke Skywalker." And Luke said, "How do you know my name?" And he said, "I am Yoda. I know many things. I know that fear leads to hatred, and hatred leads to suffering. Do not fear." And so Luke Skywalker turned off his lightsaber and said, "Well, who are you people?" And Yoda said, "Well, I am Yoda. I am just a visitor. But these people, these are the Goomlods. The Goomlods live here." "Oh, well, hello," they said. And the Goomlods said, because that's, of course, what they say in their language. And so Luke said, what are they saying?" And Yoda said, "They are greeting you in their language." That one said hello, that one said hi, that one said hey, that one said ho. They said many things, but it all amounts to the same thing. They are welcoming you to their world. And they are very friendly people. So they were glad to hear that. And so Super Duper Man said, "Well, are there any interesting things to do in this world?" And Yoda said, "All worlds have interesting things to do if interesting people are doing them." And they generally agreed about that, and they decided, well, what we need to do is we need some sort of way of getting around. We can't fit our spaceship in here. It's out parked in the hallway of the Rainbow Hole, but maybe we could rent or buy a spaceship here so we could fly around. And so Yoda spoke to the people, to the Goomlods, and Yoda said, and the Goomlods said, and pretty soon they were all talking together. And Luke said, what are they saying?" And Yoda said, "They said you can use one of their spaceships. It will fly you around. It's not really a spaceship because it only flies in the atmosphere, not in space. But it will get you where you're going, wherever that is." And so they thanked them very much, and they got into a spaceship, and they took off. Of course, it wasn't really a spaceship. It was more like an airplane or a helicopter. It was like a helicopter airplane. It had wings, but it also had a propeller on top, so they could fly up and they could fly forward. And so they flew around, and they could see from way up high that this world was very beautiful. There were many colors all over the place, and they could see the little Goomlod people walking around and going about their daily lives. And they saw that there was a great desert, a place with lots and lots of sand, but the sand was all sorts of different colors. It was very pretty. And in the center of the desert was one single tree. And Darth Vader said, "Well, that's odd. Why is there only one tree in this desert? Let's go land near the tree and see what it is." And so they agreed, and they landed the flying airplane copter by the tree, and they went out to look at it, and it was a very beautiful tree which had big green fruit all over it. And Super Duper Man said, I wonder if that tastes good. And he pulled on one of the fruit, and suddenly the tree said, "Ouch! What are you doing?" Oh, I'm sorry. I was just going to have a piece of fruit." "Fruit? That hurts when you pull like that." "Who are you?" I don't know. Who are you?" "Well, you have to know who you are." "Well, I've never known anybody else. I've never had any use for a name. I usually use names. I mean, why would I have to have a name if there's nobody else who ever comes by? I mean, I don't have to call myself by any name." "Oh, that's a good point," said Super Duper Man. And Nostril Man said, "Well, why don't we call you John? I mean, none of us are called John, and if we call you John, that way you'll know that we're talking to you when we say the name John." And the tree said, "Well, that's a fine name. You can call me John." And so they did. And they said, "What do you do here?" And John said, "Well, nothing really. I just stand here." "Well, but you don't have any friends?" "No, no. Every once in a while those goomlouds seem to wander by, but nobody ever stops and talks to me or pulls on my what you called fruit." So Darth pulled Joe aside and said, "You know something? This isn't really a very interesting world to have an adventure in. I think we should try one of the other doors in the rainbow hallway." And Joe said, "Yeah, that's a good idea. Let's go out of here." And so they said, "Well, John, it's been nice meeting you, but we really got to be going. We're going to go on a big adventure. So thanks very much for talking to us." "Thank you. Come back any time," said the tree, whose name is John now. And they all got back into the spaceship and flew back to the doorway. And they got off and they gave the spaceship back to the Goomlouds, and they started walking out the door. Super Duper Man, Nostril Man, Mayonnaise Man, Darth and Joe. And actually, Super Duper Man shut the door behind him, and he had to be pushed through. Well, it was still squeezed through mayonnaise, so he could still squeeze through the door because it had the mayonnaise stuck on it from before when they came in. And unfortunately, Luke bumped his head against the door. Ow! But that's, Luke does bump his head a lot. So they got back into the spaceship because they decided, let's fly down the hallway a little bit and see what some of the other doors are like into the worlds. And Joe said, "Hey, who has the key to this thing? I can't start the spaceship without the key." And Joe said, "Oh, that Luke has that. It's Luke's ship." And suddenly they realized, "Hey, wait a minute. Where's Luke? What? Luke wasn't with them." "Oh no," said Nostril Man. "We left Luke behind in that Goomloud rainbow universe." "Oh, okay, let's go back and get him." So they got out of the ship. They went back to that little doorway. They squeezed through there again, and Luke wasn't there. And where's Luke? And so they got back into that spaceship, which was still sitting there, and they flew back to the tree, and Luke wasn't there. And they said, "John, we're back because our friend Luke, that guy that was with us, have you seen him?" And John said, "No, haven't really. Nobody's really been by here. It's just been as usual. Nobody comes by. I just stay here alone day after day. Okay, thanks very much, John. We'll talk to you later if we need to, but have a good day. We gotta go find a friend." So they got back in the spaceship and they flew back to the doorway and they looked around and they saw Yoda. "Hello, I'm Yoda." That's what Yoda sometimes says when you walk up to him. And they said, our friend Luke. That's right, our friend Luke. Have you seen him?" "Yes." "Well, where is he?" "They've taken him to the temple." "The temple? What temple?" "The Goomloud temple." "What do you mean?" "Well, the Goomlouds have taken him to the temple. That's where Luke is now." "Where is this temple?" "It's down the road, right down there. Turn left by that large rock that's actually a huge mushroom, and that's where the temple is." Thank you, Yoda." And so they got back into their airplane copter kind of spaceship, and they flew down the road, and they turned left at a large mushroom rock, and they saw this big building. It was very beautiful, made out of colored glass, many, many kinds of colors, red, orange, green, blue, violet, and colors they hadn't even ever seen before because they didn't even exist on Alderaan, Earth, or Luke and Joe's planet. And so They walked up to the temple, and a Goomloud came up to them and said, and I said, oh no, can we go into this place? And the Goomloud said, and opened the door for them. They walked in, and there were lots of Goomlouds there, and they were all standing around, and in the center, sitting on a big chair, was Luke Skywalker. Hey Luke, what are you doing? Said Darth, aren't you coming with us? And Luke said, I don't know, they won't let me go. They won't let you go? Well, they seem like friendly people. What's wrong? And a Goomloud came up to them and said, and Darth and Joe had no idea what he was saying, but Joe said, hey, let's try the translator. They had this little translator device. It looked like a cassette tape holder, but it was smaller. It was a clear, kind of plastic-looking thing that they got from Dr. Zhivago in the In-Between universe when there was an alien on their planet they couldn't communicate with. And all you do is somebody speaks one language into it, and you open it up, and the box will tell you what they said in your language. And so they held it up to them and said to the Goomloud, what? And they pointed at Luke and said, Luke, what are you doing with him, Luke? And the Goomloud looked confused, and he said, and they opened up the box, and the box said, he is the one. One what? The one what? And the Umlaut said, the Goomloud said, and they opened up the translator and just said, he is the one, he has come. And so now they were really confused. And they said, well, you know something, let's go find Yoda, because Yoda seems to know these people pretty well. Maybe he can help us out. They went back, they found Yoda where they left him. Yoda was standing there. Yoda is a very small man with big pointy ears and lots of crinkles all over his face. And Yoda said, I am Yoda. Yes, we know that, Yoda. Listen, we're having a little problem getting our friend back. Would you come with us, please, to help us talk to the Goomlouds? And Yoda said, Yoda will come. That's great. And so Yoda got into their space kind of helicopter airplane, flew back to the temple with them, and it was that very beautiful temple, multicolored, and they walked inside. And so they said, well, could you ask them why they won't give us our friend Luke back? And Yoda said to the Goomlouds, Yoda, Yoda, Yoda. And the Goomlouds said back to him, lots of them spoke together. And so Darth said, what did they say? Yoda said, he is the one, he has come. Yes, that's what they told us, but what does that mean? It's an old legend. It is written on this planet, wherever it is they write things, that one day a tall person will come with a yellow saber, actually a rod like a king has, and that will be their leader. He will be king. A yellow rod? Well, do you think that... Oh no, when the lightsaber, Luke Skywalker took out his lightsaber and it was yellow. Maybe they think... Yes, said Yoda. They think that Luke Skywalker is their king. But it's a mistake, don't they understand that? No, their legend says that a man will come, or a creature who will be tall, and Luke Skywalker is tall to them, and he will have a yellow rod, and that will be a sign that he has come to be their king. And they looked up, and sure enough, they had put Luke Skywalker on a throne, and they were putting a big crown on his head and a big ceremony. Oh no, how do we get Luke out of this? And so Joe said, maybe we should go talk to John, that tree creature with the green fruit that aren't really fruit, because he's been here a long time, just in that same place, and he knows the Goomlouds. Maybe he can help us. And so They all took off, except for Luke, who was stuck there with hundreds of Goomlouds surrounding him. They wouldn't let him leave that big chair that he was on because they thought he was their king. So he had to stay there, and they said, "We'll be right back, Luke. We're going to try to find a way out of this for you." And Luke said, "Oh, okay." And so they took off, went back to the desert where John was, and they landed there, and John said, "Hello, what are you doing here?" Well, we came back to visit you and to ask you some questions." And John said, "Yes?" And Darth said, "Our friend, Luke Skywalker, the one we were looking for before, yes? The Goomlouds seem to think he's their king. They've put him on this big throne, they're giving him a crown, and they won't let him go. They want him to be their leader." That's strange." "Well, yes, it's strange. Can you explain, can you tell us maybe, like, if we could find their real king, perhaps they'd let Luke go?" And John said, "Well, I have some information on the culture of the Goomlaud, some of the history of this planet." "You do? Where is it?" "Well, inside one of my elbows, I have a key." "Your elbows? What do you mean your elbows?" "The green fruit that your friend pulled on." "Oh." And so Super Duper Man opened up one of the green fruits and a key came out, and John said, "Now unlock my door." "Door?" "Yes, right here." And he pushed down one of his branches and pointed at the trunk, his own trunk, and Super Duper Man could see that there was a little slot for the key to fit into in the trunk of the tree. And he turned the key, and it opened up a little door. And John said, "In there are some scrolls, and they have some information about our planet." And so Darth and Joe looked inside, and right next to a yellow stick, they saw an old scroll. That yellow stick? "Wait a minute, what's that?" said Joe. "It's a yellow stick. Weren't the Goomlouds interested in some tall person with a yellow stick?" And they said, and Yoda says, "Yes, yellow stick. Yeah. Thanks a lot, Yoda. Okay, well, what are we gonna do with this yellow stick? This must mean something. How long have you had this yellow stick, John?" And John said, "Well, my father gave it to me, and his mother gave it to him, and his sister gave it to her, and it's been passed down in my family for generations. We've always had the yellow stick, along with this necklace and this old scroll and all of these things." And that's when Joe and Darth realized John was their king. The Goomlouds didn't know it because they never really visited him. John just stood there in the middle of the desert, but he had the yellow stick. He was meant to be their leader. And so they flew back to the temple, and they asked Yoda to make an announcement. They said, "Yoda, you tell them that we have found their true king." And they brought the yellow stick with them. And so Darth held up the yellow stick to get their attention in his arm, and Yoda said, which meant, "We have found your true king." And all the Goomlouds turned around, and they all pointed with their many, many fingers, and they looked at them with their many eyes, and they started saying, and Yoda said, Joe said, what are they saying, Yoda?" And Yoda said, "They say yellow rod, yellow rod." "Well, that's great. Tell them to come with us." And Yoda says, and soon the Goomlouds came toward them, but they started grabbing Darth because he was holding the yellow rod, and they started saying, and Darth said, "What are they saying? What are they saying?" And Yoda said, "They say our true king, and they're pointing at you." "Oh no, they think Darth is their king. Tell them to come with us and we'll straighten this whole thing out," said Yoda. And so all of the Goomlouds started following them, and they didn't have enough spaceships. Well, the Goomlouds are pretty small, so about 115 of them could fit onto their helicopter airplane, and the rest traveled in their Goomloud mobiles, which were these cars that had about 12 wheels each, and they kind of rolled around on the ground, and every once in a while they jumped over rocks. So they had little springs on them so they could roll and jump. And they all went over into the desert to the tree where John who was standing there like he always did. And then Darth said, Yoda, I am Yoda. Yeah, we know you're Yoda. Tell the Goomlouds that this is where we found the rod, that this is their true king. And so Yoda said, and the Goomlad said, and they started looking into John's trunk, and they found many of the important things from their history. The ancient crystal of Amlach, which is a crystal from the Goomlaud's planet, which the king is supposed to always have, along with ancient scrolls of laws and rules and regulations and directions to the bathroom, and all the things that show that John was their true king after all, that the legend predicted would come back to them, and he was there all along. They had never known it because he just stood there quietly. And so the Umlauts thanked them, which means thank you, and Joe and Darth and Yoda went a little ways with them and then said goodbye. Yoda says goodbye. Goodbye and thank you, Yoda. And Mayonnaise Man, Nostril Man, Super Duper Man, they picked up Luke Skywalker and they got out of there. And they said, whew, it's good to get out of there. Let's go home. And Luke said, well, I kind of like that place, actually. Let's get out of here. We're late for dinner. And so they got back into Luke's spaceship and they flew out of the rainbow hole, out a white hole, back into the universe, where they got home just in time for supper. The end. Once upon a time, there was a person named Fleep who lived in a universe called Floop. Fleep drove a big plop. The plop was as long as a strasse. In fact, it stretched nearly 5 bligs in diameter. Floop. Pretty soon, all of the different kind of gleeps and globbles and a small little smidgen of flooper flop came to see Fleep drive his globber into a huge pneumimoff. And when all of the plim-ploms and the flooby blops and the snarly gleeping glops came and strafloopled the implobble lips, the blanken straffen plop, more flumpen kop, the blue from block. And flurben top, the flurben is for Fleep, after flop, a flip flop flop, got flown and flown and flown top. And Fleep with a flop, trioculus, but flown as far as a flop. For the fluiness flop, for flew, Darth, and Joe, and flew in the flew, R2, flow, see, whoa, no, got to flow, R2 blim, and we're plume with flop, and we're round, clop, got snoof for Darth, and bluff for Joe, got pooga bump, and well, back off the Morven Fleep, a hoomplaha, a hoompa heap, and plan and scrobby blop, a skloop, after blobbing pop, but flirting to floop, nor floppin'. Once upon a time when Darth Vader was 5.5 years old and his cousin Joe was 3.5 years old, Joe was over at Darth's house and they were playing together and they were mighty hungry. It was kind of hot out and they thought, hey, you know what would be perfect right now? Some ice cream. Both Darth and Joe liked ice cream a lot, so they asked their mom if she wanted any, and she wanted some strawberry ice cream. So she gave them a little bit of money to go to the ice cream store, get some ice cream, and they walked down to the store because it was a nice day out. It wasn't at all raining or snowing or dropping hot dogs or anything like that. It was pretty sunny and nice blue sky and everything and clouds. And they walked up to the ice cream store, and they waited in line, but the strange thing was they noticed that nobody in line was actually getting any ice cream. They were just walking up to the counter and walking away looking sad and dejected, which is another word for sad. And they walked up the counter and said, Darth said, I would like some vanilla ice cream. And Joe said, I'd like some chocolate ice cream. And before they could even say what size of ice cream they wanted, the person behind the ice cream counter said, I'm sorry, boys. We don't have any ice cream. You don't have any ice cream. Isn't this the ice cream shop? Yes, I'm sorry, but there's just no ice cream. Why not? Said Darth. And the person behind the ice cream counter, his name was Sam, said, well, there's no ice cream, quite frankly, because there's no milk. What do you need milk for ice cream? And said Joe. And Sam said, well, ice cream is made out of cow's milk. You take cow's milk and sugar and flavors, and you freeze and stir them, and you make ice cream. But you have to have the milk from the cows, or else you can't have any ice cream. And so Joe said, well, why isn't there any milk? And the guy said, I don't know. You'll have to ask the person we buy the milk from. He's out at the the farm, the guy with the cows. And so Darth and Joe said, well, let's go find out what's going on here. I mean, no milk is a pretty serious problem. And Joe agreed. So Darth and Joe took the hovercraft out, whoosh, and they flew out to the farm. And they landed on the farm, and they walked up to the farmer, who was next to some cows, and they said, hey, we heard that there's no milk to make any ice cream from. Why not? And the farmer says, the cows, they give no milk. And Darth says, no milk? Why don't the cows give any milk? And the farmer says, the water, she's bad. The water, the cows don't like the water. They don't like the water? And so Darth and Joe went over and looked at the water trough where the cows drink the water from, and sure enough, it smelled bad. And they said, what's wrong with the water? And the farmer said, the water comes from the creek. Yeah, but so what? Well, it always comes from the creek, doesn't it? And the farmer says, yes, but the water in the creek is so bad. And so Darth and Joe said, well, why is the water in the creek bad? And the farmer says, I don't know, it's all full of pollution. It's a bad water, and the cows don't like it. They don't give milk, and there's no ice cream. And so Darth and Joe said, well, we're going to go find out why this water is bad. And they decided, since the water is coming up from upstream, flowing down this way, they'll just follow the stream up until they find out what's polluting it. And so Darth and Joe got into the hovercraft, and they flew around along the stream. They kept going, till they came and they saw this big tube, which was emptying all sorts of terrible-looking pollution into the water, making it sound like that. And the tube was coming out of a big factory. And so they went up to the factory, and they knocked on the door, and there was a voice on the inside said, there's no one here, go away. And Darth and Joe said, but we want to talk to you, there's something wrong. And so a little slot opened up in the door, and somebody looked out through the slot and said, what do you want? And Darth and Joe said, your factory, it's polluting, it's putting pollution in the water, and the water's the cows won't drink the water, and so then they won't give milk, and so there's no ice cream in the whole town. And the guy said, that's not a problem, go away, and he shut the slot. And Darth said, this is a serious problem. Why is this factory polluting so much? What does this factory make anyway? And so they looked around the factory, and there was no sign on it that said what it was. It was just a big, ugly building in the middle of the desert, right next to the stream. Of course, the stream went through the desert, so it wasn't a completely dry desert. It was a desert with a stream through it. But they didn't know why. What is this factory? So they decided to go home and ask their mom. So they flew back, and they asked their mom what that factory was that was upstream. And the mom said, factory? I don't remember any factory being up there. And so she started looking through copies of the newspaper to see if there was an article that said that there was a factory that was built there, but there was nothing about it that she could find in the newspaper. So Darth and Joe decided to visit the factory again, and they went up to it, and when they were about to walk up to the door, suddenly somebody started firing at them from the factory. And so they dived out of the way and went behind the hovercraft. Shh, what are we going to do? Quick, the invisibility ring. And Joe put on the invisibility ring, and both Darth and Joe, because they got close together, they both became invisible, and they wouldn't be shot. And they snuck around to the back of the factory, and they climbed the walls and looked in at the window, and they looked inside, and it was a very dingy factory, and they could see that it was making weapons. Who's making weapons, and why? And And whoever it is must be really evil because, first of all, they're making weapons which are evil, and second of all, they're polluting the water. And they don't have to pollute the water. They must be doing it because there's something evil about them. Let's go inside. And they lifted up the window and they snuck inside the factory. And it was kind of dark, and there were spider and cobwebs everywhere. And they snuck around, but they knew they were invisible, so they'd be safe. And they saw a light on in a room. And they walked up to the room and they looked into the window. And you know who they saw in the window? They saw Trioculus. And Trioculus was working there with somebody else whose back was toward them. And then that person stood up and turned around, and they saw his face. It was Monoculus. Aha! So Monoculus and Trioculus had opened up this evil factory right in their own planet. They've got to do something about that. Well, Joe said we could call the police. And then Monoculus said, "Did you hear something?" To Trioculus. Trioculus said, "No, I thought I heard somebody say police. Is there somebody else in this factory besides us?" And then Trioculus says, "Well, Darth and Joe Vader came to the door, but I shot at them and they ran away." Monoculus said, "I don't trust Darth and Joe Vader. They might be around here somewhere. Maybe they've even snuck into this factory. We're going to have to release the poison gas." "Well, but Dad," said Trioculus, "if you release the poison gas, won't that poison us? Because we're in the factory too." And Monoculus said, No, you silly boy. We're going to release the gas into that part of the factory. We'll stay in this room and we'll be safe. That way, if they're in there, they'll be killed." And he laughed his maniacal laugh. And Trioculus tried. And that was Trioculus' maniacal laugh. And so Darth and Joe heard that, so quickly they ran to the window and they ran outside the factory and they shut the window so they wouldn't be poisoned by the poisonous gas. But they had a big problem. And the first thing was they did go to the police and they reported that there was an illegal factory building weapons and polluting the river that was leading to the farm. The cows wouldn't drink the water and there was no milk for ice cream. And so the police knew, well, that's breaking several laws. They shouldn't be allowed to do that. So the police went to the factory and knocked on the door. But as soon as the first police officer knocked on the door, her hand got a big electrical shock because the entire factory was electrocuted on the outside with electricity, so nobody could touch it. And so the police didn't know what to do. "We can't arrest them," they said to Darth and Joe, "if we can't get in there." And Darth and Joe said, "This is a very serious problem. We're going to have to figure out some way of getting Trioculus and Monoculus. And aren't they supposed to be in jail?" And the police chief said, "Yes, they are supposed to be in jail, but they broke free just last week. We knew they were up to no good, but we didn't know where they were. Luckily, you found out. But now what are we going to do? We've got to stop this thing." And Darth and Joe said, "Well, first of all, we'll plug up that big tube that leads to the river." And so they put a big metal plate on the end of that tube, and they clamped it down so that none of the pollution could come out of the tube, and it all started backing up into the factory. And pretty soon, they knew that Monoculus and Trioculus would have to come out of the factory because the polluted, gushy chemicals had no place to go. They couldn't flow out of the tube, so therefore they were filling up the factory, and they knew that that would drive Monoculus and Trioculus to leave the factory. So they said, "Well, listen," they told the police, "You guys get back. You pretend that you've gone back and given up because Monoculus and Trioculus are going to come out at some point, and we've got to be ready for them." And so the police all left the area and hid behind the rocks that were near the mountain on the edge of the desert, and they watched the factory through binoculars. And Darth and Joe said, "We've got to be ready to stop these guys. You know what? We're going to need some help." And Joe said, "Let's call Mayonnaise Man so that they'll slip when they come out." And so they went back, they transported back home, they called Mayonnaise Man on the telephone. He came out. He put some mayonnaise by the front door, and he quickly ran away. And pretty soon, they waited and waited and waited. And pretty soon, the door opened, and Monoculus and Trioculus were coughing because of all the pollution that was in there, because the pollution wasn't allowed to leave the factory anymore because they had blocked up the tube. And as soon as they came out, they slipped on the mayonnaise and fell down. And that's when Darth and Joe jumped out, and they had lightsabers, and they started fighting, and Trioculus pulled out his lightsaber. He was no match for them. They hit his lightsaber out of his hand, and he ran behind his dad, Monoculus, and Monoculus said, "Quick, get back into the space, the factory." Oh, and Darth said, "What? What did he call it? Did he call it a space something or a factory? That's confusing." And they got back inside, and they locked the door, and the whole factory started glowing, and lights started coming on all over the place on the outside. And Darth and Joe were looking at this thing, and soon they realized that it was getting really hot around them, and they ran and they dived behind the rock. And it turned out that the factory was a giant spaceship, and it took off into the air, and it broke free from that tube where the pollution was coming off. And they started going up in the air, and Darth and Joe said, "We've got to do something. We've got to catch them, or they're going to get away. I mean, at least they stopped polluting our river, but we can't let them get away. They'll just be up to no good soon. We've got to capture them." But Darth and Joe didn't really have a spaceship to go after them. So they decided to transport to the in-between universe and see if they could borrow some kind of spaceship from somebody. And they said, "Well, wait, we could go to Han Solo's planet. Han has got to have some kind of, his Millennium Falcon. It's got to be faster than that big factory spaceship." And so they decided that first they would transport to the in-between universe and see if they could borrow from Dr. Zhivago some kind of spaceship so they could fly to Han's world. Of course, they could have borrowed their parents' spaceship, except it was in the shop being repaired, so because it had a broken wing nut under the left ventricle. So their parents' spaceship wasn't available to them. So they went to the in-between universe, and Dr. Zhivago there, he was always happy to see Darth and Joe because he liked them, and he invited them inside, and they explained that Monoculus and Trioculus had gone too far this time. They were polluting the water, which was hurting the cows. They produced no milk. There was no ice cream, for gosh sakes, and now they're getting away, and we've got to go after them. And we were wondering if you could if you know anyone with a spaceship, or at least so we can fly to our friend Han's house on his planet, so we can borrow the Millennium Falcon and fly after these people and destroy them. And luckily, even though the factory spaceship was getting away, because they were in the in-between universe while they were talking to Dr. Zhivago, no time was going by in the outside world, so the factory spaceship was not getting away at all. It was just motionless while Darth and Joe were trying to figure out what to do in the in-between universe. So Dr. Zhivago said, "Well, we only really have one spaceship available here right now in our universe. Would you like to borrow that?" And Darth and Joe said, "Sure, where is it?" "It's over there." And he pointed, and they saw that there was a huge cow. And they said, "Where's the spaceship?" And Dr. Zhivago said, "That is the spaceship. It's the cow ship." And they said, "Wow!" And they got inside of it, and sure enough, it was a giant cow-shaped spaceship. And they took off from the in-between universe, transported back to their universe. And Darth said, "This is perfect. We're chasing them with a giant cow. I mean, after all, they were hurting the cows, and now we've got a giant cow to get them back." And they flew, and they saw the factory spaceship was not very fast, and it was flying away. And Joe radioed to the police in advance, so they'd be waiting around the other side of the asteroid that was nearby the planet. And Darth and Joe flew up, and they called and said, "Monoculus, Trioculus, we have you covered. Surrender now, or we'll be forced to destroy your factory spaceship." And they heard, "We'll never surrender. You're just flying in a giant cow." He laughed twice that time. And so Darth said, "We warned you." And he pulled a lever, and instead of shooting milk, it shot death rays. And the spaceship of the factory spaceship started exploding. Pieces were flying everywhere. And they saw 2 escape pods fly out of the factory spaceship, and it was Monoculus and Trioculus. They were trying to escape in little ships, and they flew around the asteroid, but since Darth and Joe had alerted the police, who were on the other side, they caught them in a big force field web, and they arrested them and brought them to a new prison and forced them. Their punishment was to clean up pollution on all of the planet of Alderaan 3, which was a heavily polluted planet because Trioculus had another factory there a long time ago, which had left pollution all over the place. So they had to use these special pollution cleanup devices to clean up that planet, and they were watched constantly by a giant tribble and by a cucumber monster, which would hit them on the head with cucumber peels if they tried to get away. So that was their punishment. And that is the end of that story. Okay, once upon a time, when Darth Vader was about 5 years old and his cousin Joe was about 3 years old, they were oh, I'm sorry, there's someone at the door. Hey, oh, couldn't be Trioculus. Well, let me just look, see who it is. Hello? Who are you? I'm Darth Vader. And who are you? I'm Joe Vader, his cousin. Darth and Joe Vader? I was just telling a story about you to Aaron and David. Come on in. Okay. What are you doing here? Well, we were just flying around and we decided to visit Earth. Wow. Well, why don't you tell a story then? Okay, I'll tell a story of what happened on the way here. Because we had just, Trioculus and Monoculus are in prison, and now we can eat all the ice cream we want. And so we decided to go on a little trip, and that's why we came to Earth, to visit Boston, Bloomington, and all these neat places we heard about. But we didn't realize that Bioculus, their cousin, was still out there. And in fact, he was waiting for us outside of the Earth. He had built this big galactic sticky web and he trapped our spaceship. He didn't know, though, that we could transport out of that, which we did in spacesuits, and he went in looking for us and he got caught in his own web, and we called the police and took him away. We're going to go visit the rest of the Earth now. Okay, well, it's the end of the tape anyway, so goodbye.